I'm going to talk probably for about the next 15, 20 minutes about...
Actually, if you want 25.
Oh, okay. All right, I'll just wait till see to how many people fall asleep and then judge it on that. So I'm going to talk about gaming and collaborative gaming, importance of collaboration, learning together. We still don't have... Tell you what, the first slide's not that important, so I can just kind of talk while hopefully somebody fixes it. My initial interest in gaming, again, I said was through my doctoral studies. But one of the things that's always fascinated me was more than just playing the game itself. Here we go, brilliant, thank you. The activities that happen around a game, and the way that it's framed in the context of learning, and the way that it seems so more powerful when you get people gaming together, and the different ways in which people talk together about gaming and interact around games and collaborate while playing games. And that's, for me, is almost, if not more, powerful than actually playing the game itself. So I wanted just to talk about, throw some ideas up, just sort of see which ones stick, and hopefully get some discussion going around this. So I'm going to start with a little talk about theory. So I know everybody's going, oh no, theory. So I'm going to keep it really quick. And just, what I'm not trying to do here is tell you everything about games and collaboration and theories. But these are some of the kind of key theorists and key theories that have spoken to me and really influenced me. I'm very much coming from the idea of social constructivism. And this is the idea that knowledge isn't a given in the world, but it's something that's constructed on an individual basis. My understanding and knowledge of the world will be different from yours, will be different from everybody's. And it's only through discussion and appreciation of other perspectives and through talking to other people and collaboration that we can get some sort of shared idea of knowledge and understanding. From that perspective, the work of Vygotsky has been very influential to me. And basically, what Vygotsky talks about is what he calls the zone of proximal development. And this is a very simple idea. And it's that you can learn more by working with other people than you can on your own. And this brings me back to some of the discussions that we were having this morning about the role of the teacher. And I think this is a very interesting discussion because as well as games, I'm involved in all sorts of learning technology, pedagogic innovation. And the question that often comes up is, so do we still need teachers? My answer to that is that we need teachers more than we've ever needed teachers. We never needed teachers to tell us information. We now have the internet to tell us information. We used to have books to tell us information. That's not what teaching is about. What teaching is about is providing this guidance and mentoring through the zone of proximal development, supporting learners in learning how to learn and having agency to take control of what and when and how they want to learn. And that's really important. I'm also really interested in this idea of cognitive apprenticeship. And this is the idea that actually we learn by working with people that already do, but at a higher level. So that through ideas such as coaching and modeling and scaffolding, where we learn bit by bit. And again, this really focuses on the idea of other people being absolutely central to the learning process. Another idea is Leben Wenger's idea of communities of practice. And you see this happening all the time in games. The practices and groups, and what G calls affinity groups and affinity spaces of passionate people that work and collaborate and build up communities around games is really powerful. And I think this is what's really exciting about games, not just about people playing games and collaborating online, but about the whole passion and excitement that happens around games about people collaborating together. So what do I mean when I'm talking about games and collaboration? And this is your typical gamer. I didn't have to do much of a search to find this picture. Teenage boy playing World of Warcraft on his own with headphones. And when I talk to people about games and collaboration, this is what they think games and collaboration is. And yeah, lots of teenage boys do play World of Warcraft. Lots of middle-aged women play World of Warcraft. And I think if we use that as the only model of games and collaboration, then we're not going to get very far. But it's still interesting. Then we have the other model, which is intergenerational groups, friends, playing console-type games in a turn-taking or collaborative situation, which, again, fantastic for being able to talk, to look at how other people are working and reflecting. Another model that's less commonly used is actually about using single-player games. And most games are single-player games, but using them in a collaborative way. So examples of this is about when I was growing up, and one of my first experience of gaming is that myself and my mother were really into playing adventure games. We were massive fans of Monkey Island. So when I was a teenager, we would spend hours sat together trying to solve the puzzles in Monkey Island. And this was before the internet, so we couldn't cheat. And I literally spent hours learning problem solving through this. So there's working together on gaming. When I left home a bit later on, then we used to do this using Skype. So we'll be solving the same game, but we'll be doing and talking, so that you can get the collaboration in real time on what is essentially a single person game. I've mentioned before the whole idea of communities that come around, that grow up around games. But also in games such as alternate reality games that I'm going to talk about in a minute, there's the idea that the gamer actually becomes part of the game and starts to shape the game and to shape the narrative, and the border between who is player and who is designer really starts to become very fluid. And I think that starts to get really interesting in terms of where collaboration starts and where game design begins, and the types of learning that happens in those sort of situations. There's also learning in teams. There's also learning in mobile situations. The ways in which we can look at collaboration and gaming and learning is very, very fluid. There are lots and lots of different ways of doing it. So I think we have to keep very open-minded. But for me, the one important thing, and I love this quote is from a games academic called Thiagi, who's probably been writing about games since before I was born. And he says the game is an excuse for the debrief. What's really, really important is not the game or what happens in the game or the learning in the game. It's actually the discussion and the collaboration that happens around it, people, and the chance for people to reflect on what's happening in the game. And I think that's so important. That a lot of people I talk to have this idea that we have game-based learning and we'll sit students down at computer games, they'll play the game, we don't need a teacher, and then at the end they'll go, the head's full of knowledge. And actually, for me, what games are really good at teaching isn't about knowledge, it's about skills, it's about attitudes, it's about belief, it's about decision-making, it's about lateral thinking, it's about all these types of more deeper, more reflective skills. And for that, the teacher and the ability to collaborate and debrief is incredibly important. So I wanted to finish up by giving you a couple of examples of games that I've been involved with, or a project that I'm currently involved with, which is looking at the different ways in which people can collaborate. The first one is a game called Viola Quest. Now this was run as a collaboration between Manchester Metropolitan University and the University of Bolton. Bolton is part of Greater Manchester. They're actually very, very close together. And what this game aimed to do, the problem was that we had students being induced into sort of university life, university culture. They would typically find it difficult to meet people, might find it difficult to get to know the city, but also one of the key areas that we realised wasn't really working was the way that the library introduced students to the ideas of information literacy and critical searching and ideas around that. So essentially what happened was students would get a 1-hour session in front of a computer in the first week when nothing was contextualised, they didn't see the point of it, they were just told this is how you search and this is how you evaluate information. There wasn't really any activity around that. And what Viola Quest tried to do was to contextualise and provide a need for the types of library, information literacy, skills, meeting people. And what it is an alternate reality game. And what alternate reality games do is they work across multiple media. So they use traditional media, things like phone, potentially we use the radio and the university radio, physical things on paper, physical people in shops, coupled with what's going on the online environment. This game was designed in 2008, so we weren't lucky enough to have anything as cool as Aris to play with. But so we didn't use any mobile gaming technology, but I can kind of see how we do it now. And the idea was that we had this student, Viola, and she'd started at the university, and just as she'd been leaving, she'd been rooting around in her grandmother's attic and she'd found an old letter, which was all about some sort of mystery and a mystery machine that had happened in the Manchester cotton and linen industry 200 years ago. So it was building in some of the real history of the city and the real places in the city with this fictitious narrative. And as the weeks passed, and it was run over 10 weeks, we discovered that there were pieces of an old map, and students actually had to go to places in the city that we got involved. So we had the tourist board had a piece, we had one of the museums had a piece, and actually physically pick up pieces of the map. And when they got the physical pieces and they reoriented them, you could find there was a code on there that was a GPS coordinate that you could go to, and then we had a kind of end game where people turned up. So it was about mixing real things, online things. So we had videos that were embedded into YouTube. We had a fictitious website that had a puzzle embedded within it. And the idea of these alternate reality games is that they force collaboration. They do it in two ways. And one is because some of the puzzles are so difficult that you actually need to collaborate with people from different disciplines. So we had one that was a website that had different letters hidden on different pages. And one used kind of a musical idea. So you needed to go and find somebody who had perfect pitch, or a machine for pitch. So you needed somebody with a built-in music. There was another one that needed a built-in geography. So the odds of one person being able to solve this puzzle on their own were really, really, really low. But get a collaboration together and it becomes really easy. There were other types that physically needed more than one person. So for example, getting a photograph of yourself in a certain place. So you actually needed somebody else to take a photograph. So collaboration was absolutely key to that. And for me, what I also like about this and what we tried to design it to do was to have a reusable model so that you could take the artifacts, you could take the gaming system that we used, and again, it's open source, anybody can use it, and the other places could use it. So that's Viola Quest. The other one is a project that we're running at the moment called Making Games in Collaboration. And this is an EU project which Manchester Metropolitan are involved with. But we also have partners at the Technology University of Tampere in Italy and in Belgium. And we're about 1 year in, it's a 2.5 year project. So we don't actually have any research data or results, but we're about at the stage where we're going to start doing experimentation in schools. And the idea behind Making Games in Collaboration is that there are certain key, what we call transferable skills, and the ones that this particular project is looking at are collaborative skills, problem solving, creativity, and digital literacy, and that actually the whole process of game creating and game making can be used to support students in learning these skills. So we have a game which is being produced by one of the partners called Magos, and the idea of Magos is that it's a collaborative tool for game making. So you have 4 people based at different machines and building this tool. Unfortunately, we're hoping it will be finished any day now because it would have been very good to show you, but it's still in one of these almost developed stages. As well as that, we're interested in looking at the different ways in which people can collaborate in game building. So we're going to look at supporting. What we do is the model is one where we will be teaching the student teachers who will go out and use the model in schools. So supporting them also to use traditional games and design traditional games, to look at the process for designing computer games on paper, and to look at other tools that are available for designing as groups around a single user interface. And as I say, at the moment we're about 1 year in, not got any results from that, but I just wanted to give you that as an example of another way in which collaboration in gaming can be used. And I think I might actually have finished early. So plenty of time for any questions or comments. David?
I'd love just to hear a little bit more about some of the contexts in which you're doing the collaborative game making.
In terms of the
Like subjects that are being used or different partners that you have with the actual, like, what kinds of content? Age groups, things like that.
Yeah, I can really only talk for MMU, and what we're doing is we're using it with both. The institute that I work in does teacher training, so we have primary groups and secondary groups, and for secondary we're actually using it across the whole year. So we're training up about 500 students, and the idea is that they will then go and use it in their own context if or as they see appropriate. This is why the original idea was to have this single game Magos, and then we realised that actually we only have enough computer facilities to train 50 people up. So this is when it kind of expanded to the different ways in which we could use collaborative learning. So the idea is that at the moment that in January we're going to get everybody in the secondary curriculum trained up and then kind of let it loose in the field and see how people use it. The problem that we have with the kind of Magos model is that the sort of skills that we're talking about, what we call interdisciplinary skills, in the UK curriculum we don't really have a place for them. Everything really needs to be taught within a subject. So one of the things that we're going to be talking about with students is where does this fit? And that's part of the initial, within the secondary curriculum, part of the initial discussions that we're going to have. In the primary curriculum, it's easier because we have essentially a primary teacher who teaches everything. So we'll be working with postgraduate primary school teachers and with third year primary school teachers. And again, the idea of that will be actually thinking about where does it fit into the curriculum. But the idea is that it doesn't actually matter what the game they're making is in terms of the skills that they'll make through learning the game, because the skills are around collaboration, problem solving, creativity, which are skills that any type of computer game is relevant to. But I think the practical issue for us is how we can enable teachers to fit that within their teaching practice, because the nature of the British system isn't one that makes that very easy.
I think the system of everywhere are quite challenging. Jana.
Great talk. I'm inspired to hear even more. And one of the things that I've been interested in these collaborative games is what happens to the evaluation. Do you design the evaluation systems? Do the teacher designs? And has evaluation changed in the learning change?
Yeah. Yeah, we've been having in this particular project, a lot of debates about it. Our role in terms of Manchester is to design the teaching package for teachers. The role of one of the other partners is to design the evaluation. So we've been talking a lot about what are we evaluating? Are we evaluating the game? Are we evaluating the student learning outcomes? Are we evaluating the student-teacher learning outcomes? Are we evaluating the experience? And at the moment, that's very up in the air, and lots of people have different opinions about that, because and we have also got a range of qualitative and quantitative backgrounds. So while there is a push as well, again, I've been talking about this with various people over the last 24 hours, to get numbers that prove that things work. I'm very interested in how people experience the game and what happens, and I'm not convinced that we can actually show anything significant in terms of learning from, say, a 2-3 hour game. I just don't think that it's not that much of a life-changing experience. What I do think, though, is it can, over time, it can influence how people think and behave, and this model that we have of trying to change how teachers teach, I think is much more important than trying to change how learners learn. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Sorry, there's a follow-up question?
I think you need.
Sorry.
I just wanted to say that maybe we don't need to concentrate on evaluation that much, because I think many times research and projects are driven based on, we need numbers and we need to prove that this game works. And maybe it's not like the whole point to it. We maybe just have to ignore it for a couple of years, and practice will show if the students have learned.
I agree, but I also think that part of the evaluation has to be about talking to the learners at whatever level and their experience, and that this tool and this model isn't to be seen as a kind of this is it, but if we're going to take it and refine it over time. But whether we call it evaluation, I would call it research. So I think I'm saying that I agree with you.
It's better to call it research, then it can be stretched to several years.
Yeah, it doesn't need to prove something. It can just be about, well, what is the learner experience like?
Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. This next one is also going out to David. So you have been talking about collaboration and alternative realities, and what this brings to my mind immediately is role-playing, for example. So have you been in contact with role players, role-playing researchers, because there is a lot of stuff on the subject in that field?
For me, I hadn't been when we looked at the alternate reality literature, and I think there is an issue that the alternate reality literature doesn't really touch upon role-playing. Since then, I'm now getting more and more familiar with particularly, I know there's lots of good work going on at the University of Tampere, and people throughout Finland doing things on role-playing. I suppose for me, there is an issue around the use of the word role-playing in the UK has very, very negative connotations. You call something a role-play and half the room will say they're not interested. However, I do think that we did a study around the interviewing people who've taken part in the game and talking about their motivations for playing it. And for some people, there was a whole range of motivations came out about people who like playing for competitive reasons and people who like playing for just simply to collect things, physical things, and there were people who liked the community. But there was also a significant number of people who really engaged with the narrative. And I suspect this was the kind of role-playing side coming out, and that for him, being part of the story and being able to shape the story and influence the story was really important. So having now come across the role-playing literature, I think if I were to do something like that in future, it'd be very much taking that into account.
All right, thank you.
I must say that Lisa Jedde, who was planned to hear here, had force majeure, and she will be here later. So you will hear her later, because I was thinking that Lisa would tell more about that side, and I think that's one of the reasons why Mikko is here. Mikko is our young researchers in the universe, and I would like to hear, for example, him later more. Any more questions?
One at the front.
I'd like to just pick on the debrief comment, which I think is excellent. And I think it's about the sort of the whole gaming as such, and games that we sort of create for a certain time or a theme or something. There's games. I don't feel that games are ever just for a certain time. For example, there's sort of off game talking about the themes and whatnot, which have to do with the skills and whatnot that we are teaching as part of the whole thing. So there's a process going on, which is not just a certain game as such.
Yeah, I feel very strongly that the same game can be used to teach in lots of different ways, but it's how you frame it, and it's how the teacher or whoever is using it as part of the learning experience pulls out what it is that people could potentially learn from it, but more importantly starts the process of reflecting on the game. That this is what's really, playing the game is great, it's one thing, but if you don't then think about and reflect on what you've been doing and what you've been learning, then it becomes a sort of isolated learning experience that doesn't necessarily transfer itself into other contexts. And it's this idea of game and action and reflection and then changing experience because of that that's so important.
Any more questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.